Okay, let's take a look at rounding. So rounding, very, 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 very similar to estimation. So given an example, I'm going to take a look first. I'm going to show you how to round a whole number, and then I'll compare that to rounding a decimal because it's kind of easy to show the comparison in that case. So if I have the whole number, for instance, 2,900 and let's say 37. So, and a great way to take a look at rounding too is if I look at this as money, like say this was the amount of money in my bank account, I can easily round this to say that I have about $2,900 in my bank account. That's kind of a good estimated value if I was to tell somebody what my bank account looks like. Sometimes I could say that I have about $3,000 in my bank account. That's a good rounded value as well. The difference between these two values is that one of them is rounded to the hundreds place and one of them is rounded to the thousands place. So that's how rounding works, is you have to know what place values are and where these place values are. So with whole numbers, remember with whole numbers there's an assumed decimal right here behind the 7. We don't have to put it there because there's nothing after the decimal, so there's no need to write it, but we know that it's there. So when we're looking to the left of that decimal, I'm counting my first place value, so looking at that 7 is called the ones place. So that's our ones place. And a great way to think about it is my very first counting number, not thinking about 0. When I'm counting, I start with 1. That's my very first single digit number. And then I count all the way through 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. My very first double digit number is 10. So as soon as I get to the second digit, as I'm moving further left, this is our tens place. And I can keep going. You'll know that I get through 99. The very first triple digit number would be the hundreds place. So the 9 is in the hundreds place. And I'm going to keep going, and the 2 is in the thousands place. I could keep going. If I was going in order, then we know that we would have 10,000s, then 100,000s, then millions, and I could keep going on and on. Not that you would ever see anything that far, but you get the idea. So that being said, if I said to round something to the nearest, and again, let me rewrite that number up here, it was 2937 is what it was. So if I said to take this number and round it to the nearest hundreds place, reminder again that I'm talking about the 9. So here's what happens in rounding any number. What happens is the number in front, or the number to the left of that place value, stays the same. Everything after it, or everything to the right of it, will become a 0. So I know that everything when I'm rounding, you saw in my two examples, everything ends in 0 when I'm rounding. But that number 9 that's in my hundreds place, it's the only number that's kind of in this limbo. Do I leave it a 9 or do I make it go up? And the way we determine that is I look to the number to its immediate right. So the 3. The number to the immediate right will tell me what I'm going to do to the 9. If that number, so in this case the 3 is what I'm talking about, if that number is between 0 and 4, then we simply just leave it the same. So it stays the same. If that number is between 5 and 9, meaning it's a large number, then I'm going to round up. Because that value is a 3, then I'm going to choose to keep the 9 as a 9. So round it to the nearest hundreds place. This number is 2,900. And that helps you to remember that too, is that when you're rounding something to the nearest 100, the hundreds place is the last non-zero number, so I can just call it 2,900. And that's how that would be rounded. Now if I said to take this value, and let me erase a couple things here. So let's say if I said to take this value and now round it to the nearest 10. Now that's a little bit different because I'm looking at a completely different place value, or position, I guess I should say. So the nearest 10, so that's my 3 in this case. But the same rules apply. I'm still going to take that, everything that's to the left of it and leave it the same. So the 2 and the 9 will stay alone. And the 7, which everything to the right, will become a 0. Now that 3 is the only number, again, that's in limbo. So because of that, I'm going to look to the number that's to the immediate right. So in this case, the 7. And because the 7 is a large value, I choose to round that 3 up to a 4. So rounded to the nearest 10, this would be 2940. So that's how we round whole numbers. Now, we do have one exception in rounding, and that's when a 9 needs to go up. So let's take a look at the exact same number, but instead of 2,937, let's say it's 2,967. Slightly different rules, and only slightly, and the reason I say that is because right here, if I said to round this to the nearest 100, our 9 is in the hundreds place. Well, we know that the number to the immediate right of that 9 is a large value, and remember, large means we go up. Well, I can't round that 9 up to a 10 because that would mean we'd have, if I put 10 right there, then that would round my bank account up from $2,967 to $21,000. And since miracles don't occur like that, what's going to happen is when that is the case, what I have to do is I have to round that 29 up to a 30. So this is not how that would work. Normally we say, yes, everything in front stays the same, everything behind becomes a 0. In this case, instead of everything in front staying the same, that's going to go up. Because when the 9 has to go up, then I round this up to 3,000 is what that would be. And that's the only exception, is that instead of everything to the left staying the same, like I said, it's just like we've taken that 29 and rounded it up to 30 in this case, and that's how we got the 3,000. So that's our only exception for rounding as far as all those rules are concerned. But let's take a look at rounding decimals now. So I'm still going to put that same number up here, the 2,937. But instead, I'm going to put my decimal here. In the whole number, it was behind the 7. But in a decimal, now, in a whole number, my decimal was behind the 7. But now, since my decimal is here behind the 2, that makes the 2 my ones place now. Because remember, the ones place is to the left of the decimal point, just what we saw a second ago. So now we actually have values after the decimal. So now that we're looking at these place values, they're very similar, except, and another way to think about it is if we're thinking about this as money, what we have on the screen here, obviously I know money isn't 3 places after the decimal. But if we looked at this as money, then I know that cents, when I have dollars and cents, my cents is only part of a dollar. I don't have a full dollar. If I have 50 cents, I only have half of a dollar. If I have 25 cents, I only have a fourth of a dollar. So when I have something after the decimal, I only have a part of a whole number. I only have a fraction of that whole number. So that's why you see things like tenths with a TH, which is actually our first place value. It's the tenths place. So you're seeing that TH. But we're going to kind of move in a similar fashion, that we're moving away from that ones place. This time I'm just moving to the right. Previously it was tens and then hundreds. Well, now it's tenths, and this time we're going to see hundredths. We're adding a TH to the end of it. So that gives you an idea of the same order that we're kind of following. You know that 7 is then going to be the thousandths with a TH on it. So taking this value, and let me just move all that stuff. Again, the first place value after the decimal is your tenths place. The second is your hundredth place. This is the thousandths. If I had another value after the 7, let's say we had a 1 after the 7, that would be your 10,000ths, with that TH behind it. So if somebody said to take this value and round it to the nearest tenth, then again we're talking about the 9. But all of the other rules still apply. Everything before that decimal point is going to stay the same. Everything before that place value, not the decimal point. The 2, the decimal point, will stay the same. And everything after the place value is technically becoming a 0. And I say technically because if you guys remember from math, or from me saying, not from math, but if you guys remember from me saying earlier, that zeros after a decimal point, as long as they're the trailing end of that decimal point, we're going to be able to drop them. It's not wrong if you put them on there, but sometimes they get in the way. So I would get in the habit of dropping those. But technically all those numbers are going to become a 0 So that, and in that case, that's why we end up dropping them, because they're just zeros. But that 9 is the only thing in limbo. And once again, we need to look to the number to the immediate right. Because that value is small, the 9 stays the same. So this value rounded to the nearest tenth is simply 2.9, because again, we've dropped all those decimals. Where if I said to take this value, if I had the same thing up there, 2.937 again, and I said to take this number and round it, that's a decimal, sorry, it's an ugly decimal. But if I said to take this number and round it to the nearest hundredth, then in this case, the hundredths place is this value right here, the 3. But the same rules all apply again. Everything in front of that place value will stay the same, the 2, the decimal, and the 9. That 7, which is after that place value, will become a 0, which means, again, we're going to end up dropping it. But the 3, since it's the only number that's in limbo, I look to the immediate right. The number to the immediate right is large, so because of that, that 3 is going to go up to a 4. So rounded to the nearest hundredths place, this would be 2.94. So just getting that out of habit, you'll notice that as you round everything, when you round to the nearest tenths place, you're only going to have 1 place after the decimal. Rounding to the nearest hundredths, you'll have 2 places after the decimal. Hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions at all.